the biggest game changer and has revolutionized education. I now hand over the stage to Swamiji.
Thank you, Minimum. Thank you for the wonderful introduction of all the speakers here today. I think today is a wonderful evening, and we already had one dynamic words of exchange in the last webinar, I think on 16th of January. So we have been contemplating on how we can bring in more and more insights into this NEP. NEP being introduced on the right time because, and today's discussion topic is classroom dynamics. And I strongly believe that most of the teachers haven't seen the classroom for the past 1 year because of the pandemic, and we are completely shifting to a totally different platform we call as online platform. And that said, I feel being a teacher, the emotional connect or the face-to-face interaction, the impact of face-to-face interaction has more and more importance. It is not just in teaching, but also in building the life of a student or changing the perspective of the student from totally different dimension so that a teacher alone can understand. So we have already seen the paradigm shift moving from the classroom teaching to online, and I am sure that the teachers became the problem solvers for the past 1 year, finding out the best laptop, best connectivity, best platform for online teaching, best online examination platform. So we are all now problem solvers. So given that situation, the first question to all the three panelists here. So what I wanted to understand, and I wanted the participants also to understand, what is your perspective when the national education policy is talking about diversity, about the change in the type of learning? And we saw that the CBSE has already introduced 10% of the questions as analytical questions, and they are thinking from a totally different perspective. Maybe in the standards of the US, we see that the JEE mains is conducted 4 times, and the students can keep attempting several times and will take the best score. So given the situation, maybe in the next couple of years time, when we all go back to the schools and classrooms, what is it that you see in the change in the classroom dynamics, and how will the shift, the current shift impact, or how the teachers shall be prepared to welcome the new normal? So my first question goes to Ritu ma'am. Please, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Swamiji, and I would like to discuss that NEP has brought a lot of enthusiasm among the teaching faculty, because we feel that for so long we were doing so many things, but the output was not shown as it should have been. So we want now the output should be seen, because the dynamics outside the classrooms are changing so fast. There are new jobs. We never heard about artificial intelligence coming in such an affluent way. We didn't hear about data science, machine learning. These things came up so fast in the outside world that the classroom had to be changed with the teaching learning process. So children should be given flexibility. The very good thing which I can think about the new education policy is that the word child-centric and flexible, these two words have given a lot of freedoms in the class. The classrooms will be more vibrant, will be interactive, will be collaborative. So children will learn with their own pace of learning. It won't be like rote learning, forcing things on them, pressurizing for marks. Of course, in India, because there's a lot of competition, marks at the end of the learning is important. But as you just now said that the exams which are coming up, they are giving multiple opportunities. JEE is giving multiple opportunities. Improve yourself, improve your score. One exam of 3 hours, how can that define the capability of a child? It cannot be an end to his career, to his dreams, to his whatever he has worked throughout. It cannot be an end. So I think now with this multiple exam system, multiple taking exams, coming to formative assessments, back again to formative assessments, these things will help to evolve the teaching learning process in a great way. And we have the support of CBSE, we have support of now MHRD, and so many learned people understanding. NCRT itself is evolving into the text and curriculum so much that we are now will be seeing the new children, the new pass outs from our schools with more confidence, more I can say when you don't have dimensions, when no boundaries are made, that no, you are a humanities student, you can take this, you are a science student, you can do this. How can you limit the thought of a child? The first artificial intelligence introduced by CBSE gave such a, you can say, flexibility that even a humanities student was going. He did a project in my artificial intelligence class. He was more excited. The project was won by commerce students. So there is nothing we can talk about. Only science students can do this. Coding cannot be done by our humanities. Why can't? Coding is something which is application of mind. So this is giving a lot of enthusiasm for teachers also and for learners also. So the classroom dynamics is totally changing, and we are happy about this policy.
So, ma'am, just a small question adding to this. Do you think that the technology will rule the teaching community, teaching fraternity?
Technology can never rule. Technology is always a tool. Blackboard were also tools. They were also tools. Teachers were teaching. We used to take maps. We used to take these boards with various this thing diagrams. Periodic table. Initially, when I started, I used to take periodic table to the class, and that roller, the big roller was there, and you are explaining from there. That is nothing. So technology is like a tool. It makes you more interactive. It gives you a lot of ways to collect the data. On a click of a button, I can give so much to my child. But I am the facilitator to collect the information, to give that clue to the child. Here it is. Now you explore from here. So I'm helping him. I'm not forcing him, or I'm not a teacher who's there just to give lecture. I'm with the child. So technology can never take over. It is a great tool. A lot of things we did in this pandemic. Our school, our teachers explored so much that the classrooms became so lively. So it is an added advantage to have good tools with us, and teachers are using it very promptly, and they can never replace, technology can never replace teachers.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for the keyword which you mentioned. Technology is a tool. And now let me ask let me bring the baton to Devani ma'am, asking you how do you think that the how many teachers, what percentage of teachers will take this the change in the classroom dynamics by integrating technology as a tool in the teaching learning process, and what is your take on how they should embrace the change?
Thank you, Swamiji. Now, I would just go a little back and look at the 21st century. Now, 21st century inaugurated a period which is abandonment of textbook-driven, teacher-driven, or the curriculum-driven education. Now, all this had an impact on our functioning of the schools, our functioning of the classrooms. The pandemic and the new education policy, I would say, they came at a time where pandemic expedited what was already happening in the education sector. Now, when you look at definitely this whole dynamics of the 21st century classroom rests and would rest a lot on technology. Of course, as ma'am said, technology cannot replace the teachers. It is just an enabler. But the scenario is that the concept of schooling changes from the building to a nerve center, which is porous, transparent, where teachers are sitting somewhere, the students are somewhere else, the information is being churned from a third place. So technology, number one, definitely will be the order of the 21st century classrooms. Also, the educators need to keep this in mind that an NEP has very vociferously talked about flexibility, which ma'am mentioned. Flexibility is essential to a 21st century classroom. Also, now the educators have to understand that this flexibility has to be student-centered in terms of the way teaching learning process has to happen. So there has to be adopt and adapt, and also get into the mold where one size does not fit all. So an orange is not equal to an apple. So teachers have to take recourse, number one, of the technology, but two, they have to get onto the differential teaching learning techniques. Finally, making learning very relevant, because the 21st century student is not a student who the knowledge, who doesn't come to school just for the sake of information or knowledge. So therein, the teacher, the curriculum has to align learning with the real life situation, with the real life, and have to create a connect between the learner and the curriculum. So definitely, the third thing is that the pedagogy will no more be the linear transaction. It would be a circular, it would be a dynamic, there'll be a sum total of multiple elements which will create a wholesome, dynamic classrooms. And this change is very beautiful, and we all hope that the teachers imbibe. And yes, technology, teachers will have to get into the shoes of technology. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Devani ma'am. I think Kanika ma'am, are you there?
I'm there.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. What is your view on the changing dynamics of in the classroom? So one, I'll just add to it. See, when you talk about online classes, generally we have seen in almost all the online, the portals, is that you see the word instructor. There is no teacher. There is instructor. So when we come to technology, and when we try to bring in technology in the classroom, how do the teachers maintain exactly the same way of teaching combined with technology? And when we roll out this NEP 2020, how far do you think that technology will impact the classroom dynamics?
Right. Thank you for that question. At the outset, I would like to point out a couple of things about NEP. Those are my personal views on NEP. Yes, I feel NEP is actually just a vision at the moment. And unfortunately, I feel there is no manual that has been developed to implement this vision. As a vision, most visions are beautiful, where we have this picture perfect situation in a classroom where the children are full of beans, and they are enthusiastic, full of energy, well looked after, well fed on nutritional midday meals, and the teacher is actually an embodiment of patience and love and affection, and she's a leader of her own subject, and she's capable of bringing in together, experiential and immersive and compassionate, empathetic learning. Now, as I said, that is why I think as a vision, it's beautiful. But then how does one teacher in that classroom implement it? I mean, that is taking, it's a very, very tall order on the teacher. And so the classroom is very, very dynamic as per, the dynamics of a classroom go. But then the issue is of, how to implement it. And your question regarding, teacher as instructor, and whether we will be able to do the same thing. Now, here, Chaitanya ji, I feel that if we are going to do the same thing, then why have technology? And my issue with the teacher is that if I am going to duplicate what I was doing in the classroom, it's just that the platform has changed. It's just that the physical environment has changed, where I'm in the school or in my, at home, and the child is at home in sitting in his bed or at the table, and yet we have a very meaningful transaction. And yet we continue to use the same pedagogy as earlier, the same style. That is a problem, because technology has to be an enabler for the teacher. As it has been said earlier by the other panelists, technology is just a tool. But yes, but that tool cannot be, now chalk and duster are not the same tool as technology. So I cannot expect to use or teach in the same way as I was doing with the chalk and duster. I have to adapt, I have to change, I have to evolve. And that is where the challenge lies. And that is what I think we need to focus on. We should not look for, constantly I have this problem when people talk about going back to the normal. Now, what is this normal? Who decided on this normal? What were the parameters that were taken into consideration? Why that this should be the normal? So somewhere we have to redefine that. And on one hand, I think there is a bit of a contradiction, that on one hand we talk about flexibility, allowing a lot of flexibility to the student. We cannot allow flexibility to the student without allowing flexibility to the teacher there. And there, in any kind of a situation, there has to be a structure. You talked about multiple attempts at JEE. I feel that yes, that's a very good thing, that one exam should not decide on the capability of the exam of the candidate. But at the same time, you see, when I'm trying to do something once, twice, thrice, and again the fourth time, does it give me any message? I think there is a big message in that. So is that going to actually increase the stress? My own self-image? My own self-esteem? So these are so many questions that come up in my head when I think in terms of the changing dynamics, that we are looking at it in a very constricted manner, and not looking at the impact on the recipients or the stakeholders of this entire exercise called education. I think I have said too much in too little time.
No, ma'am. As you rightly pointed out, see, this being a vision document, I think there is a lot of deliberation and discussions and a lot of kind of contemplation required on how to implement this, because the Indian education system across the states, across the cities and villages are far different from what we see. So taking it to that level, I think it is totally difficult, very challenging, unless otherwise you have the methods in which we need to practice this NEP on place and as part of the system. And as you said, the flexibility part, we are more concerned, or we have to be more concerned about the teachers, because teachers are considered as the assets for the school, and teachers needs to be they should get support. Otherwise, they will not be able to mold the future generation. So as you rightly pointed out, we have to focus on, or we have to see on how far this is practical, the policies laid down. And being a technological enthusiast and a computer science teacher, I strongly believe that technology can never replace teaching. It is impossible. But as we all agree, technology can be a tool, a tool to support the teacher in learning more and more on total different methodologies on how we can deliver the content or the stuff in the most effective way. And especially when we see this, the current situation, the change in which we were able to accept forcefully, and that is very important, and that has changed even our mindset. And we are now in a situation, in a stature where we are ready to embrace the change if it is for good, if it is, as you said, if it is to evolve. So I think maybe it will take so much of time, and that is why the whole series of webinars we have planned on deliberating on how to resolve the issues, bring up the points faced by the teachers and the principals. Let us discuss and let us come with effective solutions and try to implement this. So that's it. Let me move to the core section. My first question will be to Ritu ma'am. The most important and what I believe is something that will define the future of the students. Again, I will come back to the JEE mains. Why I am stating the JEE mains again and again is that I have seen a drastic increase in the number of students registering for the exam, and almost like 50, maybe 30 to 35% of the students, there has been an increase, and that much percentage. And I see that states like UP, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Gujarat have seen a rise in the number of students registering for this. And it is primarily, when I inquired about it, it is primarily because of the regional language. So that when you come to the regional language, promoting the native language, and there has been definitely there has been resistance, because when we talk about writing a statement of purpose or writing a letter requesting for admission in the foreign university, so how is it possible that a student or a teacher or the entire change of this the multilingual teaching, how is it possible that we can bring in such a change in the classroom?
This is a great challenge, the multilingual approach, and especially the native language which we are talking about in NEP, that introduction of the learning through native language in the pre-primary and primary classes. It is a very, very great challenge. See, there are expectations of parents from schools. When we talk about parents sending to public schools and all the other schools which are international schools and all, the primary focus is that the child should speak well in English, he should be able to write. 90% of the material which we search on net and we get in international context also is also in English language. So when we say that you start studying in your native language, and Hindi in northern states and most of the states, when we talk about Hindi being language, the child will grasp the concept very well. It is very well taken by the child because he's more comfortable. At home, many parents, grandparents still are talking in the native language. So the child absorbs it very well. But it's a big challenge. The classroom cannot have dual language system. The teaching by a teacher and how well she's versed with both languages is very difficult to understand. So a lot of training has to be done, a lot of thought process has to go. We have to see the output, what will be the output. So we have to make our rubrics, tools of assessments in that manner that we understand which has given us better results. And this can be only tested in the primary section, pre-primary, where we have a lot of time. We are not time bound with a lot of the curriculum being finished in a particular day. But as you said about senior classes, when you say that JEE exams are done in local language, even NEET exam this time they had given an option of all traditional language. There was Urdu, there was another languages. So children must have done very well because they were able to understand the question well. It's not about how you reproduce. If you understand the question, your answering becomes very easy. So that has helped many children, and it's a great move that we are giving them that flexibility of language. But teaching in classroom, how effective it will be by the teacher who is so good in both languages has to be questioned, training has to be done, a lot of output has to be seen, measured, and then only we can take this forward. I feel that.
But ma'am, let me little contradict with your opinion. It's not actually contradiction, but let me put in a different way. See, for example, I'm a teacher in the university, and I'm in the south. Okay, so let us say somebody from UP or from the North Belt come attending JEE mains in Hindi comes to the south or in any other state. Let us say any other state. How far will he will be able to grasp the topics if the topics are taught in English? And let us assume that he is planning to go abroad. And what will be the challenges faced by the student from the student perspective? Will that help him or is it a disadvantage?
See, English is always a easy way because most of the people are understanding this language. So if you talk about any other language, how the child will be able to take, it is great difficulty. I was in South, it was so difficult for me even to talk to many people because there were 20 languages spoken in Bangalore itself. And you can't master 20 languages so much coming from North. So I cannot say that it will be so easy, but of course the challenge is there. Even though people, Chinese and Japanese, when students from Japan go to US and study, it is a challenge for them. They have studied most of the texts in Japanese. In China, most of the texts in schools I have seen is all in Chinese. But when they go to US for higher studies, they adapt to English. So it is a struggle to adapt, but they have to adapt to the change. So students are, I must say, this generation is so flexible and understanding things. They are so fast in learning. So there is a challenge, and we have to see that how we bring about this change so that it is not a pressure again. It should not be a pressure. It should be something which is giving them an ease to and empower them to do well in life.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. But I still believe that there is a lot to go, especially when we say that, the change in the language being taught or the exams they conducted in the regional languages and how it will reflect in the future of the child, that is still a question mark from my own perspective. But let us hope that the change will create some changes in the system itself. So coming back to Devyani ma'am, see, we are now in a situation where the teachers themselves become the problem solvers. Now we know that the kids are so smarter than teachers, and they have much more grasping power than the teachers. What we learn in hours, they might learn in maybe few minutes. So that is how the way in which they use the smartphone. And when we talk about the learning process, so far the way in which the questions asked were totally in a different format, and now it is changing. And we hear much more about experiential learning, problem solving, critical thinking, and we are aiming to move from rote learning to or rote memorization to practical applications, so that they understand, they are able to relate the concept with the real time application. So how is it that how do you think that the change bringing or implementation of NEP and reducing the syllabus, how do you think that this kind of learning, the new methodology of learning, can be incorporated in the curriculum as well as in the classroom?
Thank you, Chaitanyaji. Now, first of all, I would like to bring home the fact that a basic understanding of rote learning, which has been prevalent across the world, it is something which we as a system incorporated, right? And memorization and reproducing. Sadly, our system did not test our intelligence. It used to test only the memory. So generations and generations were conditioned to this kind of a system. Now, when you talk about critical thinking, which is one of the key skills of 21st century, which all the educational documents lay emphasis on, which we feel that this is, I wouldn't say it is the need of the hour today. Critical thinking is a skill which is there in each human being and which needs to be honed in each human being. Now, because of the heavy curriculum, and because of our desire to have a kind of students, we got onto memorization, recall, and reproduction. Now, when we come to critical thinking, the only word that comes to my mind is from rote learning to a meaningful learning approach. Now, how do we create that meaningful learning approach? First of all, let me just talk a little bit about the critical thinking. Now, critical thinking is the only toolkit for problem solving. And problem solving then is the biggest life skill. At each point, we face problems and we need to troubleshoot them. Secondly, I feel that there is no approach as such, but such skills need to be honed and fostered in students from a very elementary stage. So instead of asking your students to mug up and reproduce, the emphasis on this, the emphasis should be on deriving meaningful connections in learning. Trying to create a pedagogical approach where the child learns from near to far, where the child creates integrated connections in learning. Further, reasoning has to be inculcated. So when you inculcate these basic skills, it's not about how I am going to teach what I teach. It is about that what skills I am imparting my student. So child needs to understand, the skills need to be fostered where the child makes informed decisions, where he is able to develop in him the art of discernment, where he is able to recognize and understand that there can be 4 different perspectives when we look at one situation. So these are some of the skills that a 21st century educator has to. Now, CBSE and all the policy, they have tried to reduce the syllabus, the curriculum, only because there was so much of talk and buzz about that the educators are under a lot of pressure to complete the syllabus. And hence the traditional chalk and talk, hence the information was just passed. There was no teaching that was actually happening. Now, when I come to how this can be integrated, so first of all, the educators in the classroom have to create meaningful learning experiences for the child, for each child. As I earlier said, that an orange is not equal to an apple. So there have to be multiple techniques to taking a concept in the class. But what really happens is the teacher walks in the class, opens the book, and from 12, 8 topics are taught in a way where the information is just faster. The educator has to take each concept and look at how the various pieces fit together. So if you're teaching water, You need to not just look at the ecological phenomena of rain, condensation, vaporization. You also need to make the child understand the problems related to water, the scarcity, the water management. But that requires spending considerable time on a concept. So again, as Kanika ji was talking about, are the educators, they need to be empowered and conditioned in a way that they are made to wean out from the traditional passing of knowledge to taking up each concept and looking at the needs of each child. Further, assessment becomes very important. When you so assessment, not just one window assessment to test, that assessment, continuous assessment, and ongoing assessment through synthesis, evaluation, and argumentation. So the child's perspective, the children and all of us have been conditioned with education is all about a right and a wrong answer. So we forget building a perspective. Again, tools of assessment become exceptionally important. That how are you framing your questions? Are you basing them on the knowledge? Are you having multiple windows of assessment? So all these have to, and if CBSE has reduced the syllabus, it is only because it wants a smooth, seamless transition from the memorization, recalling, and reproduction to a more higher order thinking skills based pedagogical approach. So another thing I would say is that there is no harm in memorization, because memorization finally creates an edifice on which of knowledge on which your higher order thinking skills are created. So yes, I think it has to be an interplay of memorization, but yes, critical thinking, which becomes the key to problem solving, has to be the main idea behind pedagogical changes that are happening.
Okay, ma'am. So you think that the change in the implementation of NEP, if it is placed in a proper way across the educators, and when we make sure that even the teachers are able to come up with proper assignments, evaluation systems, then we can definitely implement the concept of critical thinking, removing the kind of rote learning systems. Do you think that it is how far it will take, or what will be the time gap that will in the shift?
This is seriously a very tough question, because NEP is a very, very beautiful document. It is futuristic. It is such an evolved document. But whenever there is a talk about its implementation, so the educators have to change their mindset. Educators have to come out. So I think it will take a very long time, and a lot has to be done. More than educating the learner and the students, we all need to work, co-create and co-work with the educators to create that shift in their mindset. That most of the time, I remember in the social science classes, I see that teachers making student mark that the answer is from here to here. And when the child would write his own perspective, the teachers will often not accept. So that is where the child is threatened to exhibit his own perspective. So that shift, the teachers have to learn more in this case than, but yes, the implementation will be a big challenge. But this is a very, very welcoming and, as I said, futuristic document. And we need to work a lot towards the teacher empowerment for the effective implementation of the policy.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Before shooting my next question to Kanika, ma'am, I think she has a better answer for my previous question to Devyani, ma'am, because I could make out from her smile. Please, ma'am.
Yeah, I just want to add on to a few things that Devyani has said. Um, I think the first thing is that we have to get rid of the term syllabus, and we have to get used to a curriculum. And very seldom do we realize the difference. I think even educators very seldom do reflect on the difference between curriculum and syllabus. And CBSE talking about reducing the syllabus actually doesn't help much. We have to prescribe a curriculum and then give the flexibility to the teacher to take this forward in his or her class as per the need of that group, as per the need of that demographic location of that school. And then let the question, even if it is a standardized exam, let it be conceptual. Then it is free from the local dimension. But it is a concept that is being tested if we have to test. That is one thing that I want to, I feel very strongly about, that somewhere we are too tied to the syllabus. I mean, how do you decide what the example that she shared, which is very much part of the SDG goals, that yes, we have to bring in sustainable development goals everywhere, that we are, whenever we are into the classroom transaction. So therefore, then that can only happen, or even if things like gender sensitization or equality, equity, honesty, integrity, life skills. So all these can only be incorporated if we rid ourselves of a syllabus, because no syllabus can be comprehensive enough to include these things. You really can't write a textbook on this. That is the human element there. You cannot create an app for that. That is where the human intervention comes in. That's where the transaction of the instructor, as you said in the beginning, yes, and the instructor has to be replaced by the facilitator. I mean, that is a very fashionable term to use. But have we been really facilitators in spirit? And it is not easy to give up this position of power, I feel.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and we have been continuing like this for generations.
Yes.
And that is a very, very important thing. And therefore, when we talk about teacher empowerment, teacher retraining, and reworking on the educator, as Devyani said a little earlier, yes, it is not the students. We have to begin with the teacher first. Then it requires a complete revamp of the teacher herself. When we talk about experiential learning, and I say, okay, this is where the wheat for your chapati comes from. As a teacher, have I ever been out in a farm? Do I know what the wheat crop looks like? If I have not sensed it, if I have not felt it, I will never be able to bring it to the class. No amount of YouTube can equal that experience of being really in a farm and actually growing my own food. So I feel all these things that we have listed out as the syllabus for the children should be the curriculum of all teacher training institutions first.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So I'll just connect whatever you discuss now. I'll connect this with the next question. So that said, we all believe that, and as you emphasize that the NEP 2020 is still a vision, and it's only a visionary document. I have two parts for you. One is that how do you think that the change in the classroom environment will go for the next maybe 5 years time in given the current situation, and what is your perspective? Will the change be in the perspective which you think personally, or will there be a difference?
Okay. The first question first, I feel there is going to be a lot of confusion for the coming 1 year at least, till things settle down. It is like a transition that we had in March last year, when everybody was thrown into the situation, and then we had to equip ourselves to find platforms to interact with the students and to bring them back to the classroom. So there was a lot of hand-holding, a lot of learning, a lot of exploration. Now that exploration has probably happened, and I think there's an addiction in everything. Now it has also reached something that we complained about regarding our students. I think there has been, it has become quite addictive for the facilitator also. And it has become addictive for the parent also. So it is not just, it has become addictive for the heads of schools also. Now, as a vice principal, I have so much of access to the classroom of my teachers in a way that I never had it earlier. So it is definitely something which I would like to enjoy, in the sense because I have instant feedback. So that's why I said, when physically also, or when we come back in the flipped or the blended mode, there is going to be some amount of confusion, because there are going to be children with all different abilities, and there are children who require the human touch much more than others. Those are not self-motivated children. Very few of them are self-motivated. And 3, because this kind of a blended system will depend heavily on data analysis. And are we equipped as teachers to interpret, handle data? Technology might help me to collect that data, but am I in a position to create assignments which are in alignment with the data that I have received? And as I said at the beginning, Chaitanya ji, that as a teacher, I'm expected to be capable of doing everything. And I might be a wonderful teacher in the classroom, very empathetic, very compassionate, but I may not be as adept at setting a very challenging question paper or a concept checking question paper. That may not be my forte, and I have not received any training in that. So this year, I feel, or the next 5 years, are going to be devoted for schools to take a call on empowerment of teachers and how they want to rework the the responsibilities of the teacher. They want the teacher to continue to perform a lot of clerical jobs. If they are, then of course it is ultimately those 24 hours that the teacher has. The quality is going to suffer, and the parent is going to be in your classroom all the time. So the teacher has no choice but willy-nilly change the language of a transaction. I just want to share one example, if I have your permission. The other day, this was one of those very young classes that I happened to be in, and the teacher sensed my presence probably. And the question that was put to this little one was, 3 and 8 will give you 11 after using which operation? Now the child was foxed. And I was really, really upset about this, actually speaking, but I didn't want to butt in if that was not the right thing to do. But what I'm trying to say is, am I trying to impress my senior? Am I trying to impress the parent or the grandparent sitting there? Or am I trying to reach the child? So somewhere my priorities have all got mixed up, which was not there in the classroom when the transaction was between me and my child. So these are the various, which I think no document can actually document these issues. These are the issues that we will have to sort out at our own local level. And so therefore, next 5 years, I see that a lot of experimentation, a lot of back and forth that is going to be happening. It's not going to be one streamlined, settled system like we have been used to, where everybody does that rote learning, appears for an exam, moves on to the next level. Learning is not challenged. Knowledge is.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. In fact, I have two things to from your answers. Yeah, I don't think that we have enough time to discuss about that, but I'll just mention my concerns. Concerns, it's not really concern, but and I really appreciate the way in which you have put forth about the data analytics skill, the data of data analytics required for teachers. In fact, I'm planning to do a webinar on that alone, because that is one of the biggest skills that will be required for the entire teaching community. Without that, I don't think that technology can be taken as a tool. Otherwise, as you said, the teachers will be completely immersed in the ugly administrative job. And of course, people like you as vice principals and principals. And another thing I wanted to bring to your notice is when you talk about the moving from syllabus to curriculum and ensuring that you have a topic and the topic can be defined, or the subtopics can be defined by a teacher. That is what a curriculum means, right? So how do you think that the balancing across the country on that topic for a class, for a subject, how far do you think you can balance that at the same level? Because I have seen when I used to teach, we also have 3 to 4 campuses, and I used to teach from one campus. So there were experts or better teachers than me, and I had always struggled to reach at that level, because the question paper was to be one question paper, and the questions asked were in such a way that all of the questions were mostly kind of analytical questions. So I had to end up preparing analytical questions, and I had to struggle a lot. So reaching to that level, how far is it possible, or what is the kind of change that is required from a teacher's perspective?
Right, that's I just love that question. I feel, as I said a little earlier, we have to relook teacher training. And it is like I said, it may not be a forte of the same teacher to have these 5 different capabilities. There might be some, those are born teachers, but there are others who are not. They have to be trained to become teachers. And so maybe we can have a system where we can subject experts actually delivering the content. And we can have another set of people, educators, who are actually in our everyday life. I mean, I'm not talking about a standardized exam. I'm talking about even in a classroom, where another teacher whose skill lies in setting concept-based analytical questions. And that can be divided. I mean, why do we look at the teacher as one compact composite whole to be able to do everything? And here, it's like, I will take an analogy from, say, medicine. There is this MBBS doctor who can go till that much to give a full perspective on the ailment or the issues or the concerns. Ultimately, you have to go to a specialist when the problem has been identified. So also, I mean, if there is a learning challenge, I have to have another person stepping in to handle that learning challenge. I mean, it is all very well to say that we have special educators, but is a special educator also who is adept at handling visually challenged students is going to be equally adept at handling somebody with Down syndrome? Because the canons are going to be very different. The tools are going to be very different. The mind mapping is going to be very different. I mean, for another child, I can have, different colors and draw certain flow charts and all that for an ADHD child. But I cannot do that for a visually challenged a child. So I have a different frame of mind, a different mindset, a different focus. So we need to have greater focus on skills. And I think maybe we'll have to do this like a bridge period until this gap is bridged. And trained teachers, the current set of teachers need to be, of course, taking the lead. And again, if you could repeat that second half of your question, it just missed me. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, my question was exactly see when you talk about the curriculum and syllabus, that is the one of the best ways to improve the entire education system.
Right.
Okay,
Yes,
because
you talked about what happens to the sub topics, right? Yes, how to become a uniformity.
How do you balance
Yeah.
across the country?
Right. So that I feel that we have to have a very, very solid audit system. There is no audit in education, unfortunately, and whatever is there is just on paper. So if we have to have a proper audit, it's just like that. A lesson plan goes to the next level, to the subject coordinator or the head of the department, until it is approved by her or the next principal or the vice principal, whatever the hierarchy a school is following. So we can have that same thing. It could actually be audited by these bodies, accredited bodies, to see that the curriculum has taken care of certain outputs that we desire to arrive at through these this entire curriculum transaction.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So let me apologize for keeping Ritu ma'am waiting in the loop. And I just wanted to bring in, ma'am, when we talk about experiential learning, I think we have discussed a lot about experiential learning. But on the other hand, so I don't want to pose a direct question, rather I want to give a challenging question. On the other hand, we see that a lot of companies like Byju's are coming up with app. So you have a mobile application, you have a tablet, and the parents believe that we can just learn. The students, their children can just learn with the help of animation. And how do you differentiate between the application-based learning with animation kind of thing and gamification? And how do you differentiate that with the experiential learning that is envisaged by the government in the new education policy?
See, both are very, very effective and both are very good. We cannot say animations are not important or gamifications are not important. Today's generation is gamification friendly. We can say the Toycathon, which has come, the new initiative by the government for Toycathon, is because they know that children are playing games and why not involve them into something very constructive. So I have seen my children have made a beautiful game, how to learn valency, how to learn the various balancing of reactions by certain games. So if children can design such good gamification themselves, and that can be used by another person who is not very good at making games, but has learned the concept so well, why not use it? So till now, teachers were doing experiential learning, taking them out, taking them beyond classrooms, showing them the reality. But sometimes physically it is not possible. You cannot show, if you want to show a creator or something, or you want to show a basic structure inside something which is dangerous, you cannot touch it and you cannot go to that particular location. It is not that you cannot teach, you have to teach. So the experiential learning was one method where many people have used it, even in villages. Teachers I observed some classes, and even in villages, teachers used to take them out and show them a very good way of dissemination of lecture in the outskirts, beyond the classroom boundaries. But when this generation, our generation is so much tech savvy, and they can design themselves. That if a teacher has used those methods of gamification or of something where animation is required, then why not? I used to feel when I used to teach chemistry, there were certain topics in benzene resonance, how the electron has moved from one place to the other. I cannot do it experientially. I could have not done it with the simple teaching aids. Now, when I show that resonance or I show that process in animation, it is so clear. So Byju's is not that everything. Byju's is not everything that, oh, leave classroom teaching, leave regular and go to Byju's and use that app. But I have seen children who used to hate mathematics, who were scared of mathematics. There was a little scare in them, have started enjoying mathematics. So we have to draw, you can say, a place where we have to tell a child that the concept has to be taken, but concept cannot be gone into that dimension that you are wasting time. So time, because when you get engrossed in that, you forget your time, and you have not put your things in the right place. That, oh, I wanted to finish this today, but you have gone beyond. Then you are panicky at the end. Oh, I wanted to finish this, but I have not done my particular portion. I went into depth to one topic. So that should not be there. Children should be trained how to use it. Even teachers should take this and help in the classroom, that how much you have to go. But I have not seen anything wrong in Byju's app. Anything concept cannot be learned, but it cannot only be learned by an app or this thing. It has to be supplemented by classroom teaching. It has to be supplemented by a subject expert. That subject expert can be teacher, that subject expert can be parent, and it can be a peer. Why not another peer can be also a subject expert? He's learned the concept better. So children will have now various dimensions of learning. It will not be only through classroom. A teacher is doing a child peer approach of learning. Even teachers are learning from peer group. I saw this time all the teachers who were about to retire, and we never thought that they will adopt to technology so far, saying that it is my last year or a year is left. They adapted to technology learning so fast. They used to learn from children, they used to learn from other teachers, and their classroom, when I used to observe, I used to feel that at that age they have become so smart, and they are doing teaching. Economics class was so interesting with the teacher who was about to retire this year. So when at that age, it is an induction where the teacher feels that I should learn, I should be able to handle, and we are allowing children not to use it. It is sad that we have to tell children, please use it, but in a way where it is helpful, how much you can implement it, how much time you should spend on it, and you should look to some other ways also. So you cannot divide the two. It has to be added as a cohesion and make learning more interesting and fun for children.
Okay, ma'am, when you said that the student was scared to learn mathematics, and when he moved to an app like Byju's or any other app, he found it interested. So let us assume that I am that maths teacher who was not able to create interest in the student on my subject. So do you think that it is my incompetency, or I have to be competitive enough along with an app? Because when I say that I am a teacher, definitely I have some experience. And being a mathematics teacher, if I am not able to create an interest in the student, and an app is able to, a machine is able to create an interest, do you think that is it my incompetency, or teachers should take it as a challenge to improve themselves, upskills themselves? Because see, I know virtual learning systems because our university have virtual labs, but we always say that it is only virtual. It's only virtual. It has nothing to do with the realistic thing. Because when I show a picture of an elephant to a student, or if I show a real elephant to a student, that connectivity, there is some connectivity. Are we losing that connectivity when we depend on an app? And is the teacher becoming in a survival mode, or has the teacher need to get some improvement in the teaching methodology? Because I believe that as a teacher, I am expected to create interest in the students on the subjects which I teach. So am I failing in that? What do you think?
It is not failing. It is that the teacher at that time did not know that she can explore that also. So she was bringing, when a teacher was teaching measurement, she was bringing the scale, she was bringing the protractor and other things. She was bringing the measuring cylinder in the class. It was not that she was not bringing, but at that time, the animation and gamification was not there for her. She has not learned that way. In her school, it was not taught that way. So she has to upscale, she has to upgrade, she has to explore, and she's feeling happy to do it. It is not, I had not seen any teacher who has not felt good after exploring something different and putting in the class and seen the result. When the teacher sees the result, it is not as incompetency that she did not do it and she did not create the interest, but she has now understood that my child's interest lies in something beyond that. So should I go beyond that? I should not limit to this because I learned this way. I cannot be restricting my children to learn the same way. So there is no incompetency. Teachers are more active nowadays. They are becoming competitive. Each one is becoming, they are in groups. They are sharing information. So much of information is being shared. Earlier, it was not there. There was, I am the HOD or I am the boss and I am the subject expert. So what I am saying in the class doing is the best. And you are the junior, you've just joined. So you learn from me. It is not that. Junior can also teach you something good. So it's now the departmental meetings, the departmental interactions. So there is no incompetency. The competency is coming through various ways. Everybody is learning. And I'm seeing that happiness by learning and reproducing and then getting to know that I have discovered. Even the child is feeling, I have discovered today. The children who had made those toys, a toycathon, and they went to the final round, they were so excited that their tools, toys will be shown, the games will be shown to so many other students. So that's the level of satisfaction, achievement, which is bringing through technology, through change methodology, through government policies, through new education policies. Many things are changing, and I am seeing that a lot of enthusiasm is there. We should not bring it down, this enthusiasm, this change. Try to put ourselves into that picture, that how much we can put it into use, and let not wait for policies and visions to come. Whatever we can grasp from the NEP now, and it is for betterment, implement it. At least we can do it flexibly in our class. Nobody stops us. CBSE has no stopping for anything good learning. So why we wait for government to dictate it to us? Let's use it happily, accept the changes, let the teachers be trained. The first thing which talks about CPD, that you have to have 50 hours of training. Why they are saying 50 hours of minimum training? And I'm seeing teachers who used to travel so much, go for capacity building class, the training. CBSE said you have to come here to that venue. They wasted so much of time. Now on a click of a button, they are doing all the trainings. They have got Diksha, they've got MOOC, they have got Coursera, so many trainings. Cut. I get 5-6 trainings done every day, and my teacher does it in her leisure time and she sends me the certificates. So it is not that. They are also upgrading. Teachers are understanding that they have to adapt to a change. I am not a loser. I must not say to myself a loser. I have to adopt it. I have to bring the best to my classrooms. And it's only pushing from the school, the management and the heads, that you have to keep on pushing and motivating them and training them, bringing them to a vision that, yes, this is what is desired. And things will move smoothly. I am very positive about this change.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for such an insight. I wanted to make it little bit challenging, because then we debate on a lot of things, and it was a wonderful example that you spoke about the toy making challenge, right, which will bring about creativity across the students. So it was a very good example, and as you rightly pointed, definitely that upgrading itself is very much important, and we have to evolve as we move ahead, and especially when these kids are smarter. So coming to Devyani ma'am, so given the situation, the relationship between the student and the teacher, or the teacher and the learner. How is it that important, or it is very important to maintain that social connect or emotional connect? And how is it possible in this current scenario, and especially when we think about the future, the years to come? How is it possible to cultivate that kind of an environment, which will keep the teachers as well as the students encouraged throughout the course?
Yeah, thank you, Chaitanya. So before I get into this question, I would just want to bring home to the fact that the term teacher, when we talk about the term teacher, when we think about this term, suddenly this term only brings to the mind somebody who is very wise, who has got a lot of knowledge, and that somewhere teachers are also at the back of the mind conditioned to, that we are transactors of knowledge, right? However, in subconsciously, the relationship between a teacher and a student ever since has had a special, a special flavor to it. All this deliberation that we are talking and doing today, at the hem lies the student-teacher relationship. Now, when we talk about a teacher, we understand that teacher is not just imparting knowledge. Somewhere she is playing a very, very critical role in the emotional and social development of the child. So things like mutual respect, things like compassion, things like, am I making learning the way my student is wanting to learn? Or maybe, am I encouraging my students to explore their passion? Is my classrooms empowering the student and letting them face the challenge of failure, or try again, or am I teaching them resilience? So that somewhere the teachers started, not all of course, but by and large, the role became, I come to the class, I impart knowledge, I have to do certain projects. As and when the changes in the curriculum keep happening, I need to imbibe that. So teachers, secondly, the teachers are under a lot of pressure. Now, all this can happen when they are liberated from the pressure of result, from the pressure of marks, because there's somebody sitting at the top of the hierarchy, which is actually sitting there, and how many 50s, how many 60 percenters, why not 90 plus? Till the time this, and that has an effect on the teacher-student relationship. So there, that is very important to understand, that the student-teacher relationship, which for years, for times immemorials, has been the most closest bond between, and a very unconditional bond. But now, two things are the biggest challenges in which come in between the student-teacher relationship, changing student-teacher. One is the pressure of marks, which the teacher already has from the hierarchy, which she passes that pressure to the idea of finishing the curriculum, finishing the syllabus at that point of time. So somewhere the relationship gets diluted. Now, again, my question is, we need to is the teacher letting the student explore the wrong answers and the right answers, take that kind of an understanding, or is the classroom environment devoid of intimidation, emotional frustration, because the child is probably, and comparison? All these things. Now, thirdly, with the press of the button, the knowledge is there in front, the information is there in front of the student. So then what is the role of the 21st century educator, or what is the role? So the role is not just a primary dispenser of knowledge, but helping orchestrating learning and converting information into knowledge, knowledge into wisdom. That is creating students lifelong learners. That will only happen when they both are in a space which is devoid of any kind of pressure. Of course, let the structure be there. Now, with pandemic situation coming in, as it is, the relationship somewhere got an interface of a screen. So the bond of respect and the personal touch was somewhere diluted. Now, coming back, when we come back to the new normal, come back to our classroom situation, the educators, with the 21st century educators, will have to get conditioned to that education is not about the right and the wrong answer. It's actually about building a perspective. It's also about letting the student enjoy the process of learning and not just be too focused about the product, that is the result. Let the student fail. Let the student understand what failure is. Let them teach them the lessons of resilience. This is going to be the new bond that an educator would be able to create with the student.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that wonderful advice and insight. So the last question in this whole round is to Kanika ma'am again. It is a debatable thing, which I want you to give at least 2 to 3 takeaways for the teachers, because I think you have you from your own experience, the example you cited in the previous discussion. See, to come to a curriculum mode rather than going to the syllabus mode. How is it that the teachers should prepare? Let us assume that currently it is curriculum mode. Currently it is not the syllabus mode. How is it that you think the teachers should prepare for the next 5 years, maybe for their own benefit, for their own career growth? And rather than going into the breadth of the syllabus, how do you think that, or whether we should go into the depth of each topic, which is the most important thing? Secondly, as you rightly pointed out, how is it possible, or why should the teachers be a data analyst, or how do they inculcate that culture of data interpretation, understanding from the data, or getting insights from the data? How should they prepare for that? And let me put it in another way, that your answer has to be a very good advice to the teachers, the participants attending this discussion. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Right. I'll begin with the second question first about data analysis. I think we all need to, the technology that we have is going to assist or collect the data. But then it is for us to decide what to do with that data. Now, if the data reveals that a particular child is pegged at a certain level and another at another level, we cannot have the same assessment for both the children. It is okay. It is not a race to be run. And in every subject, the child may not be pegged at the same level. That is very important. B, I feel any data will go awry if the language of assessment and of transaction is not very clear. And here I feel language of the communication is very, very important. A little while ago, we were talking in terms of, ma'am was talking about, using these apps and creating the interest in the subject. And I myself use that example of that mathematics class. Now, if I were to put the same thing in a different language, which is child-centric, if I might say, or child-friendly, if I were to put the same problem, as in, if suppose you have 8 sweets in your bag and your mother puts 3 more sweets into your bag, how many will you have? Now that is experiential. The child can identify with that. And so the child knows the concept. The child does not know the jargon. And very often the problem with our assessments is use of jargon. And when I mark a question, an answer incorrect, is because it is not adhering, as Divyani also said, in a social science paper, right? So the teacher marks from here to here, this is the answer, and no other, my way or the highway kind of thing. So it doesn't work like that. Has the child understood that concept? Now that language is very, very dense for the child. Maybe for another child, it is not so dense. So we have to be very, very careful about the language we use. I know teachers use elucidate, elaborate, explain all as synonyms. They are not. So first the teacher has to understand what is the difference among these terms. And only then the child can be expected to respond. A child might be able to explain it, the concept, but the child may not be able to elucidate on the concept. It is quite possible, and lose out on those marks. The third advice that I would like to give is the whole concept of zero. I feel no child should be given a zero, because the child has got up, come to school, brought his bag, bought the tools for attempting the exam, probably lost last 2 nights sleep over that. So there is some human element to that. So when I put zero, that means I'm negating the entire human effort. So it cannot be zero. And that is very, very detrimental to a child's image. Instead of writing a zero, yes, my system doesn't allow me to do anything. At least instead of writing zero on the paper, I can write a note instead. I know you have tried. I know you could not recall, but I appreciate the effort that you made. But maybe we can meet and discuss this further. I mean, it is just that. And I'm sure that is going to be a game changer for that child. The child has heard enough from his parents, from his relatives, from the peers, maybe from other teachers. So that is what is required, I feel. These apparently seem very small things, but these small things are what make the entire picture for the child. I mean, from this end of the screen, I am looking at 40 children, but I am negating the individuality of that person. Here we talk about experiential learning, and we talk about, personalized learning, individualized learning. But if I'm still following this practice, it's in complete contradiction to this individualized and experiential and personalized learning. So how is it customized then? And the other thing that I would like to say finally about, when we are recruiting teachers, or even when we are taking students to become teachers for B.Ed or nursery training, whatever it might be, I think one very important component has to be the psycho-emotional component. It is just not marks. Do I have the mindset to be a teacher? Why do we never test that? Not everybody can become that. I have to first have the mindset for that. And that is where we are failing ourselves. We are failing our children, and we are failing the nation and the world. I think that's all that I want to say about this matter.
Okay, ma'am. In fact, it is wonderful that your final wordings is connected with my next question to all of you. In a I want a very crisp answer to that, because the entire country, or the schools and almost all the educational institutions are facing the same issue which you just mentioned now. And when I ask my own students on how many of among you, a 60 class student, a 65 class student, how many among of you are interested in becoming a teacher? I see maybe maximum 1 or 2 hands. And how do you think that the situation can be improved? So I want to start from the same point where we stopped, Kanika ma'am.
Right. Yes, because we are living in a very, very materialistic world. And whether we like it or not, we like to philosophize about it. And we say that, teachers have to be passionate and all that. But yes, then passion also needs some petrol. So therefore, there needs to be, we have to take care that teachers are well paid, well looked after, and their own well-being should be the priority of any management, of any government. And when we have, during Corona times, when we have seen teachers selling, fruits on the roadside, it is very, very heart-wrenching. There is nothing small about that job, but the fact is that they have been reduced to the situation. But so therefore, that respect can only come when we do not, commodify education. We have commodified education. We have parent agitating. We have teachers agitating. So that commodification has to be taken away in the first place. And the second, the respect can only come if the government gives that kind of respect. The country, if they become one of the highest paid people, let them go through a very, very rigorous system of selection. I'm all for that. As I said, they are as important as doctors. I mean, they are mental doctors. They are therapists, actually speaking. And so therefore, they have to be given their due. And if we can do that as a nation, I don't see that we will have any mediocre teachers.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So next is Devani, ma'am. What is your insight on this?
Yeah, so I resonate completely with Kanika's thought process. The only thing I want to say is that, as you said, that when you ask the batch of students of 60, how many raised the hand to become a teacher? Because somewhere, anybody and everybody feels that I qualify to be a teacher. And often it is the work-life balance that brings in, and less of passion. So for most of the educators, it is more of a work-life balance for them, rather than it goes, that becomes their passion, or it goes beyond the call of duty. So that is the kind. And yes, there's just one thing I want to say, that till the teachers start respecting their own profession, their own identity, nobody can, no government, no policy can add that element to. They don't respect, they don't invest in their own growth. Here we are sitting deliberating, but how many teachers even buy the reference book with their own money? They rely on the school to give the textbooks. They rely on the school for the in-service trainings. We have to respect ourselves for the profession to be respected. So, yeah.
Thank you, Devani, ma'am. Ritu, ma'am, your insight on this?
Sir, I would say this is the best profession to be in, and we should enjoy. And the next generation should be prompted to take it, because it is a big challenge, and with the next generation is not taking this profession as seriously. So let's all join hands and say, please promote this profession. It's a wonderful profession, and let everybody understand the dedication which is put by teachers. I feel that most of us are doing the best seriously. But of course, if you are not by choice, if you are forced, then that satisfaction will never be there, and you will never achieve what you want to achieve in life. So let's put this forward, and government should come up to promote teachers in a very, very good manner, as compared to earlier, I must say. Yes.
Okay, thank you, dear panelists. So before wrapping up, I have a couple of takeaways for this session. And before wrapping up, I would request Meenu ma'am to raise the questions posted by the participants in the chat box to the panelists.
Yes, Swamiji. There is this question from Dr. Nair, and the question is to you only. And it reads, how can we ensure that the purpose of education is meeting the purpose of life? What should we do to sensitize the students and parents? Don't you think stakeholders like industry and higher education should conduct such sessions with students and parents only, without the presence of teachers?
Yeah, no, it is a wonderful question. So my take on this, or my answer to this question is, it is possible only with the help of making the students aware about the realistic world. And my feel is that, for example, let me quote my own example or my students' example, where we have a system of live-in labs. We call it as live-in labs. We ask the students to go to the villages, and the students who go to the villages are actually engineers. They are expected to work in the industry. So what we do, we ask them to stay with the villagers, understand the problems, and they have to solve that problem. For example, a house or a village is not having electricity, or they are not getting the water, or whatever natural issue they face, the societal issue they face. Engineering students are expected to understand the problem, come up with a solution, and try to solve that problem in the real world. So that alone will give the students an understanding about what is happening across the country, or in their own villages and cities. For example, we all are facing the same issue across the country, right? Traffic jam. Or we all are facing the same issue, pollution. So all these are issues which are faced by the country, the people, for a long time. So how is it possible for us to create a kind of thought process among the students? And this is my perspective. I'm sure that the panelists will have a difference of opinion, maybe additional input, because they all belong to that category where the teachers are considered to be the parents of the students, because the teachers spend, or students spend, most of the time with teachers. So I'll extend this to all other panelists also.
Want to say?
Should I put in something?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think
please.
first I really want to congratulate you on this life lab that you're talking about. That's really beautiful, very interesting. It's a dream come true situation. And to that, I feel at the school level, it should be mandatory. It is there in NEP also. It should be mandatory to have a community outreach program for every student, and in in a very genuine way. Not, again, it's not just lip service, just not on paper, but and due credit should be given. And you talked a little about foreign universities, where they're very insistent about our engagement with the society. And I know lots of students coming back and asking for these recommendations. And I've always said that I'm not going to do it, because I'm not going to lose my credibility by writing something which never happened. And but subsequent to that, that inspired me to start off a system where we had our economically underprivileged students staying back. And I told my class 11, 12 students that you have to stay on after school hours for twice a week, and you have to give in at least 30 hours to mentoring these children. And if you fulfill those 30 hours, I'll give you the certificate. Now, the intention may not have been, that lofty of the child, but willy-nilly the child did it. And I know that there has been some connect. So we can do these things, and same thing with the industry. What Dr. Nair has said, I feel that at school level, it should be the community outreach. Maybe at the higher education level, it should be an industry link, where they really get to check out the kind of professions that they would like to pursue, and the kind of skill sets that are required.
I would like to add that the school has already promoted, our school has already promoted Interact Club activities, where the child doesn't have to do an activity because he wants the recommendation. It starts from the primary class. These children are doing this Project Bunyad, where they are teaching the underprivileged children right from primary class. They are doing outreach programs because they are part of Interact Club. These human values are not to be done when they are passing out or when they want recommendations. They are done in the school because they learn these values as they grow. So by the end of the 12 years, they have so much accumulated outreach programs and interactive activities and these projects that we don't have to think. At least it goes half a page when we just sit and write, because we don't have to thought process. Everything is done. So each child has been given those grades right from primary to senior. So this, we should not inculcate that as you are leaving, you need something, so you do it. No, you do it because it's a part of your learning in school. So it has to be drilled from lower classes, and it will build your portfolio in 12 years so good. So these club activities are to be done seriously, to be taken by children seriously and by schools right from primary. So then it will flow very easily, and there'll be no bridge which has to be, no gap which has to be bridged later on in life.
Okay.
So
Meenu
I
ma'am,
would say,
yeah, yes, Devini ma'am.
I would just want to add one thing, that ever since time immemorial, and Krishnamurti says that what is the purpose of education but preparing a person or an individual for life. So now, how do you prepare? Because most of the time, the schools are in a rut to finish the syllabus. And so these are the small opportunities where the child is encouraged to go beyond his classrooms and contribute to the society. And I think what Kanika said was extremely good, that she said that she will, because most of the universities do ask for these outreach programs, because they want the child to be compassionate and sensitive towards the outside world, what the society is in real life. So that is an effort which, and any new education policy does talk about internships and such kinds of projects to be taken, but they should not be limited to project files. They should be real life projects. So yes, if we want our children to be well groomed out personalities who have a good sense of society, and we want to mitigate the crisis which we see around us, we need to expose them to social scenario.
I
Okay,
just want to add one more thing here.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
This is right. I mean, what Ritu ma'am said and what Devyani said, right? Yes, there is this effort at creating this sensitivity right from the beginning. But I would also like to know that as schools, are we, not or holding back a child's promotion because the child has not is a bully, for example, or has been very violent? Have we given it its due importance? I mean, it is all very good to implement these practices, but then I want to know what is the corrective measure that we are taking. So that is something which I feel which is worth pondering. That if we really want to bring in humane education systems and bring up humane children, then we have to make these things matter, or to be conveyed in a language that everybody understands. And unfortunately, everybody understands the language of marks. So when and the moment you attach marks, it becomes very, very significant. So am I holding back a child on these grounds? I don't know of any school that is doing it. Then
in fact,
that is what. Thank you. Yeah.
In fact, what you said was, I was thinking that why is there not a report card which tests the the human factor in a child, which grades him, whether, because you spoke about bullyism, and that is one of the major issues, because you've spoken that it is there. So why do we restrict our report cards to marks or grades? Why isn't there a report card for a development, overall development of the child, where his human, not just the IQ, but his EQ and human factor is also assessed. So yes, these are the issues that we need to kind of ponder over and integrate them into our system.
So in fact, what Kanika ma'am told is right. See, we are definitely holding back. I too feel so. And the system has to evolve in such a way that we are too flexible to implement these kind of practices, and it might take a long time. So before wrapping up, let me just pull down the takeaways, and there are 5 to 6 points which I wanted to emphasize on, which has evolved out of this session. And let me thank you all for the sincere cooperation, because I was a little debative in between, and I wanted to bring in the other side of the question also. That is why I created a situation where we debate each other so that it is more interesting. And I realized that at the end, when we come out with our own opinions, it was totally interesting. Okay, first thing is that one is as Ritu ma'am suggested, technology has to be taken as a tool. And from a technological point of view, I strongly believe that there are still teachers fearing about the online classes, whether the teaching job will or the technology will take away the teaching job. Definitely not. It is not possible. Even the survey by the BBC says that the elementary schooling, school teachers and the high school teachers' job is the least affected job, even if there is a technological advancement. The second is, as we all agree, our teachers have become more and more flexible, and this is going to be a ground, or this is going to be an opportunity where even there is a drastic change in the implementation of the NEP. Our teachers are now ready to accept that change, because we have changed a lot because of the unprecedented and unexpected situation that was created by the COVID pandemic. The third thing is, I feel as rightly pointed out by Kanika ma'am, and I used to practice whatever you said. The important thing is that let us not stick on to the topics in syllabus. Let us make out, or let us think, let us start thinking about the curriculum perspective rather than sticking on to the syllabus, because if I strongly believe that it can be practiced. And if we think from that point of view, we can easily cover the syllabus already laid down by the authorities. And there is no harm in thinking beyond. There is no harm in thinking or implementing or coming out with more and more topics covering the breadth and depth of the subject, so that over a period of the time, the teacher herself or himself becomes so competent. The fourth thing is data analytics. One of the most important and interesting things that has come out of this session, which is totally different from or separated, but it needs to be integrated from this session. I feel that teachers should start, especially looking out for the tools. There are a lot of tools. One of the best tools is Excel. Nothing beyond Excel. So teachers should start practicing on how they can make use of the tools like Excel. And finally, as we all agreed, we should always promote the students to be teachers, and at the same time, as rightly pointed by Kanika ma'am, and we all agree to that, they should have that mindset. So how do you bring, or how do you create a situation? How do we make sure that the students come out with that kind of a mindset? So let us start debating and let us start exploring. And thank you all the panelists, thank you all the participants for the patient listening. I feel that the whole 1.5 hours was much more interesting and enriching, and we hopefully we will see again. And I feel over a period of time, we will have a lot of deliberations, a lot of discussions, and definitely there will be some outcome from these discussions. We will come out with some kind of a valuable output. And let me invite now Devani ma'am, who was instrumental in pulling this out. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. From the bottom of my heart, I thank everyone on behalf of both Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham and EduDays. And I think that's a project that we both came together and deliberated. And we thought that here sitting in Delhi NCR and tier 1 cities, we talk about new education policy. And I also happen to have interacted with a number of educators and principals in the tier 3 cities, and they were completely oblivious, except for listening to that the policy is there, but they were not aware of what are, or probably they didn't get the time. So we jointly thought to come up with an initiative where we could take up various concepts and just deliberate on it. And this has been one of the very fruitful webinars, and I could see the kind of rich discussion that happened. I end with this, that yes, classroom situation will change dynamically with the integration of technology, with the newer perspectives that the world is throwing at us, with the changing teacher-student relationships and the demand of the society. But we all need to understand that we all have to work towards mitigating the crisis that we see around us, and no other forum than education is the best way where we could work towards reducing the crisis that we see in the society, and hoping to create a very meaningful education system for our nation. I thank everyone to have graced this forum. Thank you so much. A special thanks to Dr. Nair, because I was reading the comments and I think he's created a corpus of content. I mean, I'm bottom of my heart. Thank you so much, Dr. Nair. It was so enriching. Your comments were very enriching. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chaitanya ji. Thank you,
Meenu ma'am.
And thank you,
Meenu ma'am also. Thank you, Kanika ma'am. Thank you, Ritu ma'am. Thank you, all the participants. Have a wonderful day and weekend ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.